This is the decision point with Anand Nanduri. Anand, you're here because Brandon Aiyuk is still a 49er. J.J. McCarthy is not going to play this year. There are other injuries and other rumors swirling. How are you?
It's good to be back, man. We had a fun time in Canton, chopping it up with everybody that wanted to come say hello. It's been a long time. But it's good to be back, man. We got to do this more often. People
Yeah,
keep asking.
Canton was great. We had a great time. Some late nights, talking a lot of football. That's why the people are like, you probably don't want to talk about fantasy teams and strategy. You probably had enough of that. And I'm like, no, this is what I'm here for. Like, I have plenty of time during my day that I do business stuff, and I'm not talking football. I'm not talking fantasy. I'm here to talk to the people about their fantasy teams. A lot of people with IDP leagues, a lot of people with Dynasty leagues, hit me with trades. Hey, I'm trying to steal Michael Wilson from this guy. This is what I want. This is great.
It's the best time of the year, man. We have all these practice reports coming out from training camp. You have scrimmages going on, preseason. The real thing's almost here, and it seems like once that happens, we're kind of all the way in it. This is our last chance to kind of talk through long-term strategy before we're, in the belly of the beast, so to speak. So excited to get into it.
Can you explain to me how and why the 49ers and the Steelers have a trade in place, the structure of a deal in place to send Aiyuk to Pittsburgh? This is silly to me. I don't understand it. I was dismissive of it all along, and now it sounds like it's actually going to happen, but I'm not quite ready to admit that it's about to happen, even though everyone's telling me it's going to happen. And I'm thinking, how the hell is this going to happen?
Yeah, so basically the Niners offered Aiyuk a deal that's a little bit below market level. The reported number, I think, was $27.5 million. Wide receiver ones are getting in the neighborhood of 32 to 34, which is right in line with where we think his deal will ultimately fall, with whether it's San Francisco or Pittsburgh. Basically, they shopped him around. What's up, Tyler? They shopped him around a little bit and kind of granted him the ability to go find the deal that he wanted from someone else if they were willing to give San Fran what they wanted back, which I'm told was a first. And he ultimately, though he doesn't have a no trade clause, he ultimately has veto power because the team acquiring him has to know that they can sign him to a long-term deal. That's his leverage here. So New England, he didn't want to go to. Cleveland, I'm told he didn't want to go to, and that they weren't super serious in their pursuit of him. So it kind of came down to Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh, to my knowledge, has offered no higher than a second. It might be multiple picks, but no higher than a second. And the holdup here is the Niners' last-ditch effort to say, hey, Brandon, you'd rather be here than there. We know that. What number will it take for us to come to a deal for you to stay here? Because they have Brock Purdy for another little while on his rookie deal.
Yes.
And
it's the Brock Purdy rookie deal. That's the window. How do you allow a key piece of your offense, which is one of the great values of Purdy is the supporting cast that he can distribute the ball to. If you lose that, then you lose some of the value of Purdy in his rookie deal as well. It's nonsense to me. Aiyuk has so much more value, institutional value, to San Francisco than any other team. It doesn't make sense. That's why this doesn't make sense. And that's why I'm still not there, assuming this trade is going to happen.
The toughest part about Brandon specifically, right, is any Niners fan will tell you what life was like without a true X outside. They had plenty of really good receivers in the Shanahan era, but none of them were that true dynamic number one outside threat that is 3rd and 7, just win for us over and over again. And the guy that they had to go to before that was George Kittle over and over. If you remember, his massive fantasy seasons were the years that they just desperately needed 3rd down conversions. It was Kittle over and over and over again. And to have a guy like Aiyuk, pair him with Debo and Kittle and McCaffrey, and you have the makings of roster-wise the best offense in the league.
They're the favorite to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, you're taking Aiyuk away from San Francisco is not as simple as, hey, we're losing a wide receiver one, we'll plug in Ricky Pearsall. Like, I like Ricky Pearsall a lot. I thought that he went even higher than I thought he would in the draft when we were there. But I love Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall is not Brandon Aiyuk. I'm sorry, man. Like, there are maybe 8 or 9 guys in the league that can go out there and do every week what they ask Brandon Aiyuk to do. And the thing is, all of them are either on rookie deals or have price tags north of $30 million. There's just no way to go find that guy in the draft consistently. And if there was, then teams would never pay him. And there's a reason that they get paid $30 to $35 million a year. If I'm San Fran, I'm just paying him. Screw it. And I know that it's a lot because you've paid Kittle and you've paid Debo and you've paid McCaffrey. I understand all of that. Your window is now. This is it. Because as soon as Purdy makes $65 million a year, yeah, get ready to hear that. As soon as Purdy makes $65 million a year, some of these pieces are going to have to go. So why would you basically shut your window 2 years before you have to? I don't get it. I don't know if they're just not comfortable with paying Aiyuk $35 million a year. I don't know what the holdup is, but
What is the holdup? Why won't they pay him? Explain.
I don't know.
Please explain why they're lowballing him. Why?
I think it's just because they have so many other expensive pieces and they're worried about what will happen when they do have to pay Purdy, because you're not going to sign Aiyuk to a 2 or 3 year deal. There's just no shot. He's going to demand 4 years, probably $130 million, somewhere in that range. A lot of it guaranteed. And, as their assets age out, the biggest concern for them by far is McCaffrey aging out, right? As soon as that happens, there's no one you can replace him with. There's no other player in the league that we have that can do the things for you that Christian McCaffrey does. And where they're sitting right now, there's no player on their roster. There's no one that they can trade for that does the things that Brandon Aiyuk can do, which is why I thought the Browns trade that was reported was somewhat interesting, sending Amari Cooper back, because he allows you to reopen that window at least for a little bit. But to me, if I'm John Lynch, I'm just paying Aiyuk and saying, good luck everybody else. We'll eat the money when the time comes. And if they were going to trade him, we talked about this earlier in the offseason. If they're going to trade him, if he's not part of your long-term plan, then you should have traded him months ago. I don't know why it would linger on into August 15th, 16th, 17th. There's no reason for us to be here right now.
It sounds like he's not going to get traded.
I wouldn't trade him. Like, if your goal is to win a Super Bowl, if that's truly your goal, if you want to tell your fans that that's what your goal is, we're all in. We're doing everything we can to win a Super Bowl. Brandon Aiyuk is the best player that you can line up at X this year to win a Super Bowl. Now, long-term reopening windows and kind of playing the game, so to speak, I understand why you trade him, but that's for teams that are on the cusp or that are on, that are playoff contenders. We're not talking about that. We're talking about Super Bowl favorites here. They're the favorites to win the NFC again. They should be. Detroit's coming, but again, in a weaker NFC landscape than they have in the AFC, your biggest challenge is get to the Super Bowl, where there are three or four teams that really have a shot to even clip you in the NFC. The AFC, there are like 10 that you would have to go through, and you only have to play one of them in the postseason. So my understanding of all this and kind of how I would play it out is I would pay Aiyuk his money, whatever he wants, and then you reassess 2 years from now. Because if you don't win a Super Bowl in the next 2 years, then Purdy's window of being a cheap contract is already gone. Then you have to take inventory and reassess everything that you're doing and figure out where you have to make cuts here and there in order to make the money work. But for now, who cares?
Who cares? Thank God that they got Purdy with the last pick in the draft. They have an extra year. If they had signed him as a free agent, they'd only have him for 3 years.
Yep.
The signing of Brock Purdy in round 7, the last pick, fucked him. Right? He would have been so much better off as a free agent. That's why if it's the late 7th round, the last thing you want is to be drafted. You're like, no, don't do this. Because if I'm betting on myself and I'm productive in the first 3 years, I want to get out of there and have negotiating leverage as soon as possible, not have to wait that extra year.
Yeah,
this is the window. It's they got a couple years here, and then that's it. Before they have to pay the 500 mil, whatever it's going to be in a few years. Brock Purdy, 500 million, whatever it's going to be, $1 billion.
It's Brock specifically is such an interesting case study in what can happen to a quarterback that has some skills and some tools, but you surround him with really great players. In year one, it was clear that Shanahan was doing a lot of the heavy lifting for him. The offense was allowing him to see ball, throw ball. And then in year two, you saw him progress into a guy that can extend plays. You saw him progress into a guy that trusted his reads and was throwing, with timing, accuracy, anticipation. You saw a lot of the traits grow from year one to year two that you want to see. And a lot of these quarterbacks that come into the league and struggle so much is because they don't have consistency around them. They don't have an O-line they can trust. They don't have receivers you can trust to get open. And so when you put all of this back together, Brock Purdy is going to be significantly better if Aiyuk is there than if anyone else is there. And if you're the Niners, all you care about is justifying and making sure that long-term contract for Brock Purdy is viable. Because if he has another year of Brandon, another year of Debo, Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, let's say even 2 years, you're hoping that by the end of that year for progression, he's become enough of a quarterback that he can supplement some of what you'll lose when you lose a Brandon Aiyuk or a Debo or a Kittle or a McCaffrey.
Think about what this also means for all the related players. So talking to Billy Muzio, and for the last few months, he's been the most bullish on Jawan Jennings of anybody. And so you got to think about what does this mean? Does this mean Ricky Pearsall's the guy? Ricky Pearsall's the guy you got to draft in seasonal leagues and best ball leagues? No, Ricky Pearsall's not even playing right now. Ricky Pearsall's out. Maybe he'll be back in a week. Who knows when Ricky Pearsall's actually going to practice, take part in preseason. And whenever I see a raw developmental player missing weeks of training camp and preseason, I scratch him off my list. But you want exposure to this offense. And in the final round of a draft, like Theo and I, in the final round of the Kings Classic at the FF Expo, who do we draft? Jawan Jennings. It's a sharp room. A lot of guys that we like are gone in the last couple rounds, but there was Jawan Jennings with the final pick. So the Mr. Irrelevant in the Kings Classic was actually Jawan Jennings, ironically, to Player Profiler, Theo and myself. So what this tells me is that A, San Francisco feels pretty confident in Jawan Jennings to even be entertaining this offer, number one. Number two, Pittsburgh is not as bullish on George Pickens. If Pittsburgh had their locked-in alpha and they knew that between, Calvin Austin stretching the field and Roman Wilson, who they just drafted in day 2, Pat Freiermuth, they could put together a perfectly adequate passing game. You're not going to spend all that money on a second receiver if you already have your alpha. It's like the odds that T. Higgins stays in Cincinnati is very low, right? You don't think T. Higgins is going to stay in Cincinnati, right?
I do not.
Right.
I don't think they'll pay him.
This is the most frugal franchise in the league. The last thing they're going to do is put luxury bucks down on a T. Higgins. That's not what the Bengals are going to do. And Pittsburgh they're a conservative franchise. And there's absolutely no way they're going to put at risk a top 10 pick next year. This is not what Pittsburgh does. When was the last time you saw Pittsburgh wheeling and dealing draft picks?
Minka Fitzpatrick.
And probably that worked out pretty well, didn't it?
Yeah. Smart people.
They have to know in their bones, right? And if it's a wide receiver, the idea they would potentially give up, because They're playing the Browns, the Ravens, and the Bengals, right? The aforementioned Bengals. So there's a very good chance that even Pittsburgh, as delusional as some of these franchises are, they may realize this is a rebuilding year. I don't know. I haven't talked to anyone in the Pittsburgh front office. I don't know their mindset. I don't know how delusional they are. I don't know if they're like, this is our year. Yeah, we got to figure it out. But if they were being realists, they would look at this like a rebuilding year. And the last thing you're going to do, the other problem is Carolina just learned this lesson.
Mm-hmm.
We just saw Carolina embarrassed, losing their first pick in the draft because of a big wheeler dealer move that blew up in their face, totally backfired the previous year. So even less likely you're going to see Pittsburgh put a first on the table. So now it's a second, but it's likely a top 40 pick, let's say. Let's say Pittsburgh potentially could finish bottom 8 in the league. If you're San Francisco, like, this could be a top 40 pick. We could get 2 Pearsalls. Oh, wow. Right? That's the thing. I don't trust John Lynch and San Francisco to do anything with that draft pick. So again, if I'm a San Francisco fan, I do not want this happening. Like, there's some situations where I'm like, you know what? Let him walk. Take the picks. Take the picks, man. In this particular situation, I can't imagine. Right? And I'm usually the one that's like, I'm fine, not overpaying. You want to pay me for the privilege of overpaying my player? Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
That's typically from Laramie Tunsil. For years I've been saying this. With Aiyuk, I'm like, no, you got to pay this guy. You got to pay this guy, and you can figure it out next year, man. They'll cut a bunch of guys on defense. They'll restructure an offensive lineman. We talk about this every year. Just pay the guy, and you can figure it out in 6 months.
There just aren't mid-20-year-old wide receiver ones available. It's not a thing. Especially ones that can play X outside and win consistently. They just don't exist. So, but I think, with his case specifically, because we've seen what Purdy looks like without him, or what Purdy looks like with him. I don't think you want to know what Purdy looks like without him. No. You don't want to find that out right now.
And I mean, you'll never. I just
you're the
when
Super
I
Bowl
see
favorite.
A deal in place. And I'm the biggest skeptic when it comes to these things, because I am like, smoke season, watch out, eye roll, smoke season, right? When I do see reports that a deal is in place, if you say, in quotes, deal in place, I start to acknowledge that, okay, maybe I was wrong. Maybe this deal will happen.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like the ball's in Brandon's court. Do you want to be a Niner for a little bit of a discount, or do you want to go to Pittsburgh and make more money? That seems like basically the impasse that we're at right now. And look, every day that goes by that he's not in Pittsburgh's camp is another day that he doesn't learn that offense, is another day that he's not creating chemistry with whoever the QB is, whether it's Wilson or Fields. If you're Pittsburgh, you want him there as soon as possible. And if you're San Fran, you also want him there as soon as possible. So I don't know what the hell the holdup is, but this whole situation is very strange to me.
And he's not practicing. He's holding in, right?
Yeah, what are we doing here?
Right. Is it a hold in technically, or not even?
I think it's a hold in technically. I don't know.
Is it a hold in? Is it a hold out? We know Jamar Chase is holding in. Jamar Chase is helping people with towels, right?
Yeah. Yes, he is. That's a deal that needs to get done ASAP.
Well, that will happen. I mean, that's the ultimate team guy. We don't know the relationship between Aiyuk and Kyle Shanahan. At one point, Kyle Shanahan benched Brandon Aiyuk. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, because he didn't think he was blocking hard enough.
Right. So this has not been the smoothest relationship over the years. So, no, if I'm Brandon Aiyuk, San Francisco isn't my number one choice. Right?
It's not Pittsburgh.
If you're a wide receiver, yes, championships are nice, and playing in the Super Bowl is great, but you want targets and you want appreciation first and foremost. And it's also nice to play for a coach like a Mike Tomlin. right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I feel like I'm going to get the appreciation, I'm going to get the coach I want, I'm going to get a notch higher salary that I believe I deserve, it's compelling.
Yeah,
It's compelling. So what you're saying is it's in Brandon's court, and that if he wants that deal in Pittsburgh, that the 49ers will accept a second rounder because it's likely going to be an early second?
I think so. That's at least what we've heard so far. So there could obviously be a team that has an injury in camp, a contender. If this goes through the weekend, for example, you could have a contender that has an injury to their number one that thinks this is their year and they're pushing all the chips in, and they could surprisingly become contenders for Aiyuk, out of nowhere. The longer this drags on, the more it seems like he will probably be moved. It's just a matter on his end of how much money do I want to make in either of these places, because he can make as much as he wants to make anywhere. It's going to be somewhere in that $30 to $35 million range. It's just a matter of, if San Fran will give him what he wants, which to this point, it seems like they haven't.
Okay. Now, in the chat, many are asking about J.J. McCarthy, about Sam Darnold, and we will get into it after this. Hey, it's the Podfather. I have great news. The draft kit is live. It is world famous. Why? Because it is the best resource for winning fantasy football championships that exists. There are rankings and cheat sheets for every format you can imagine. We have projections both at the team level and the player level. And wherever you are, you can click on a player, open them up, and see in-depth written analysis about what to expect in fantasy football from that player this year. And then you can click on the team and you can get even more in-depth analysis, all the drivers of fantasy production, both in a positive and negative direction for that team, including a signature trend. And the graphics are incredible. So these team insights, they give you the team level projections, the vacated targets, the vacated ARs. And we added a bunch of features. Individual cheat sheets for Theo and Billy and Dario. So you could take your favorite analyst and download their personal draft cheat sheet. And then in the commissioners section, Memphis Young lays out everything you need to know to manage a league. The best minds in the industry contributing analysis. It's certainly not the most inexpensive draft kit on the market, but it is the best. PlayerProfiler.com/draft kit. PlayerProfiler.com/draft kit. Go get it. Yes. J.J. McCarthy. Sam Darnold. Nick Mullins, is he still a Viking?
Oh God, please no.
You don't like Nick Mullins?
Please God, no. I can't do this again.
Okay. All right. So talk to us about J.J. McCarthy. What is he thinking? What are his people thinking? What are the Vikings thinking? How is this going to play out?
Yeah, so the tough part with JJ's is whenever you have a meniscus injury, the tough part is until you get in there, you don't know. You can have all the imaging done that you need done, but if you get the trim, you're out for, I think, 4 to 6 weeks, something like that. And if you have the full repair, then you're out for 4 to 6 months. And that kind of seems like where JJ was headed, and they wanted to, out of an abundance of caution, they hope he's the future. They don't want to risk, re-injury long-term. They don't want the quick fix. I think they did the right thing here based on everything that I was told. That being said, it is a tough setback for him because you wanted really, the Vikings wanted him to push Darnold in the job outright. They didn't want to hand it to him. They didn't want to just say, hey, you're our top draft pick. We're just going to hand you the keys to the offense and move on. They wanted him to really grind and earn it. And if you watched him, he was the preseason game that he played. It was a very tough first sequence where he threw an interception and then he came back after that and he looked brilliant. And you can sit there and argue all you want about, it was second and third stringers and it's the preseason, but that's all we have to go on. It's not like we can see him against other first team defenses. That just hasn't happened yet. He can only go out there and play against the guys that they allow him to play against. And so I thought he was really impressive. And obviously it's a devastating blow to the Vikings organization as a whole, who, hoped that they would have this lightning in a bottle rookie that, basically they've lost a year of his contract already, which just sucks. You want those. There's nothing like the live bullets. You can simulate them all you want in practice. You can take all the reps on the sideline. You can hold the clipboard, but there's nothing like a 280-pound man running straight at you. You can't replicate that. In a simulator anyway. Yeah, there's not quite anything that gets the adrenaline pumping like that. So it's tough because I don't want to consider it a lost season by any means, because he's still going to learn a lot. He's going to be around Kevin O'Connell, who's a very, very smart offensive football mind. They have great players there. I think Aaron Jones coming over from Green Bay, I think will help him a lot, because he saw the progression of a Jordan Love, got to learn under Aaron Rodgers for a while. So he has guys around him that have seen young quarterbacks develop and what is required. But it just not having him out there really sucks. And then when you get into the Darnold portion of things, I think he's a gunslinger, man. That's who he is. That's what he's always been. I think the volatility on all Vikings has gone up because JJ McCarthy is a relatively safe player in terms of how he plays the position. He's not going to throw ridiculous 40, 60 balls. He's not going to throw into traffic without, having a place to go with it. Darnold will make those throws. And so it's either a huge blessing or a huge burden for this offense any given week. I think if you're looking at a betting market, it increases the volatility of the Vikings. I think they could also be significantly worse than they would have been with McCarthy, but they could also be significantly better. Week to week, this team is just going to basically go as Darnold throws them, if they allow him to play that way, which is my assumption. You have a Justin Jefferson and a Jordan Addison, and those are two of your best players. Get them the ball. So I don't think it'll be, Aaron Jones 500 carries. That just doesn't seem to be the way that they like to roll over there. So he's going to get a lot of pass attempts. I've seen many people tweet out things about throwing down on him as offensive player of the year or as a dark horse MVP candidate.
What?
Leading the league in passing yards, another one that I saw, because the volatility is there. And Jefferson is, an alpha enough receiver that if you just feed him with targets, he can get you to basically 2,000 yards nearly on his own. So, all of these things, as crazy as they sound to us, there is some logic behind why people are pushing Sam Darnold. And it's because he's kind of he's kind of in that Jameis Winston vein where he's going to throw a lot of really, really interceptable passes, but he's also going to dot you up in some games that the Vikings probably would not be in without him. He's going to keep him in. So in terms of the fun index, the Vikings just became a whole lot more fun. The watchability score went way up, but in terms of, week to week fantasy production, yikes.
On the contracts tab on Player Profile, I'm looking at the contract for Sam Darnold. Almost $9 million guaranteed. That's a big contract for a backup quarterback. Yeah, so he is making significant backup quarterback money. This is not a $5 million deal. I know it's like, a few $1 million. No, it matters. This matters. So the Minnesota Vikings clearly felt this was a quarterback who could absolutely operate in a starting capacity at a high level. Think about where he's been, right? He's been in San Francisco where they're not going to play him over Purdy. Purdy's just better, right? So it does make sense that you'd be bullish on Sam Darnold, but not that bullish. Get out of here. What it tells me is there's actually less risk for Justin Jefferson, and there's a less likelihood that the Vikings would try to manage clock, manage reps of a rookie, and they would just say, listen, we're going for it, right? We're just going to go for it. We're going to go for it on fourth down. We're going to be throwing more. We're going to be playing a little more up-tempo, because that's the one thing is if you've been in the league for a while, you can play a higher tempo than if you're a rookie. So there's a bunch of things, actually, a bunch of new headwinds, in addition to the Jordan Addison injury. I know that he doesn't have a long-term problem, but he was carted off. Being carted off in preseason is a lot different than being carted off in the regular season. I understand that, right? A camp card off is not the same as being carted off in the third quarter of week 3. However, he was carted off. It is a relatively serious ankle injury. I've seen so many of these ankle injuries where the coach was cagey about the extent of it and the severity of it. And then it comes out weeks later, oh, yeah, all along that was a high ankle. They just didn't report it.
It's the lowest of low ankle
it's
sprains ever.
The season hasn't started yet. So the rules around reporting injuries are not the same now as they are in the season. So the transparency isn't necessarily there. I am skeptical. I will have to see it. And if I see it, then I'll believe it. Jordan Addison on the field week 1. I hope he's there, right? Theo and I drafted him in the Kings Classic. We want him, right? We felt like we got a great value, $9 in the auction on Jordan Addison. We were like, yes, please. A lot of other wide receivers in that tier were going above $10, so we were happy. But it would also be nice for Justin Jefferson to stick it to all the fantasy gamers that were drafting Lamb and Chase and Hill over him. And now we have the recipe for that to happen.
If Justin Jefferson goes for like 1,800 yards this year, would anybody really be surprised? Like, the guy is just, it does not matter who his quarterback is. If he's out there, he is so ridiculously productive. And that's the thing. We don't know if CeeDee Lamb would be productive for a season without Dak. We don't know.
We know the Tom Savage corollary. We know it happened once. For half a season, we had 8 games from Deshaun Watson and 8 games from Tom Savage, and DeAndre Hopkins scored the exact same number of fantasy points in the first 8 weeks. In the second 8 weeks, he just had a hell of a lot more targets that were a hell of a lot less catchable in the second half. That's what happens with these alphas, especially an alpha in the CeeDee Lamb, in the Amon-Ra St. Brown situation. If it happens to Joe Burrow, it's not the same as we saw last year because you have Higgins and you have other options that are, at least going to draw the eye of a backup quarterback. So, yes, will Justin Jefferson have fewer accurate passes? Yes. Will the target share go up and more than offset it? Yes. Right? And also, because the pace of play, I think, will be faster with Darnold, then you're going to get just more red zone visits. It's going to lead to more touchdowns. I think that is now a super safe pick to go Jefferson. And you can go Jefferson over Bijan, over Breece Hall. I love the builds. I prefer the builds where I get a Lamb or a Jefferson or a Chase or an Amon-Ra St. Brown in the first round. I do. I think they're better builds.
I agree. And I think, when you look at that tier that has kind of separated itself, where those wide receivers have floors that you just can't match with anybody else, save for quarterback. Like, premium tight ends don't have their floors. Premium running backs really don't have their floors, other than McCaffrey, who's an alien. We don't even count him. But those guys give you such a week-to-week floor and an astronomical ceiling that you just can't find elsewhere. Yeah, I know Darnold's yucky, man. I know it's ugly. But,
go Jen in the chat saying Darnold is yucky. It is yucky, and you don't have to draft him. There's plenty of other quarterbacks to draft, right? I would rather have Justin Fields if I'm drafting my second quarterback. In Superflex, then Darnold's actually interesting. It's an interesting conversation with some quarterbacks. They're super sexy in Superflex, like just pass volume.
Yeah.
Out of my second quarterback, just give me pass volume. That's all I care about. Pass volume, pass volume, pass volume, pass volume.
Yeah.
But in a single quarterback league, it's not enough. He doesn't run enough for you to care. If my second quarterback in a one quarterback league, it's going to be someone like a Deshaun Watson. The pocket passer threshold where I'm willing to go for a second quarterback in a deep one quarterback league is Matthew Stafford. I think Matthew Stafford is going to be prolific this year. His pass volume and his production is certainly going to eclipse Darnold. He's a much better quarterback with better weapons. So, of course, you want Stafford, especially playing his games in the NFC West. But the NFC North, NFC North is going to have just as many shootouts. Maybe if that's hard. Okay.
They're
not maybe as many as the NFC West, but there's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot of shootouts. You get Detroit, Chicago, Green Bay. Now you have Minnesota. If Minnesota had a great defense, then you could see them just saying, okay, the only way we're going to compete in this division is to try to slow the ball down. But they don't, right? They don't. That's the beauty of it, is like the weakest team in the division also has a super weak defense, and that's just going to fuel yet more shootouts in the NFC North. I'm loving the NFC North. I'm loving the NFC West.
I think that the important part to take away from that, right, is when you look at what Darnold's production will look like. I'm obviously much more oriented on the real life side of things. What does he look like as a quarterback? Can he get to his reads? What does his 5-step drop look like? All of that. But if you're looking at it purely through a fantasy lens, if you anticipate that the Vikings defense is going to be relatively poor, and we do, he's going to have to throw a lot.
That's what I'm saying.
Like, he's going to have to throw a lot. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because again, fantasy wise, interceptions really don't matter that much. Like Jameis's 30-30 season, he was still a really good fantasy QB. Like, your interceptions you're not penalized enough for interceptions to offset the amount of yardage and touchdowns you'll gain in garbage time from a guy like Darnold. Garbage time's the best, man.
Garbage time.
If you're looking for like a DFS start one random week and you're looking for a cheap QB and you want Justin Jefferson, just tie him to Sam Darnold.
I can't believe that Aaron Jones is my favorite dead zone running back. I can't believe it. But he just goes so late. People think he's yucky. He's not yucky. Aaron Jones has never had a season where he was run into the ground, where he had to absorb like over 300 touches. No, he's been a lightly used race car. He's best comparable to Christian McCaffrey on Player Profiler. Just his skill set. You'd be hard-pressed to find a running back that has a closer skill set to Christian McCaffrey than Aaron Jones. You go, Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs is a little more electric, a little more of an explosive player. Christian McCaffrey's not the most explosive player. He's just fundamentally sound in all phases and elite as a pass catcher out of the backfield, someone that Sam Darnold can trust. You could see Sam Darnold's a two-read guy. Jefferson's not there, Jones. Jefferson's not there, Jones. Plus all this garbage time where they're going up against defenses that are sagging off and Jones is ripping 5-10-yard runs. It's so easy. It's so easy. He's not a typical 29-year-old running back. He's had a lot less wear and tear than there's been less wear and tear for Aaron Jones than Josh Jacobs, and he's like 4 years older.
Yeah.
It's not the same, man. You can't go by chronological age in this particular situation. So the two players that I am buying based on this J.J. McCarthy injury are Justin Jefferson and Aaron Jones. And with J.J. McCarthy, I think buy him in Superflex in Dynasty. There's going to be plenty of teams that are trying to win a championship, and they've got J.J. McCarthy on the IR, and there's going to be plenty of scenarios where you can just make sure, put it on the calendar almost. Maybe put a calendar reminder in the middle of October or into November. If you're out of it, or you're even feeling like you might be out of it, go hunting around for J.J. McCarthy and see if you can find it, because what's going to happen is people are going to forget. They will write this in the calendar note that J.J. McCarthy was awesome for a couple weeks of training camp, and he was going to happen. People are going to forget that. And also, if Darnold is prolific with the interceptions, that will also sow doubt in the future of J.J. McCarthy. And all J.J. McCarthy is going to be able to do is sitting there in the meeting room, soaking it all in. What would you rather? If you're a J.J. McCarthy dynasty manager, would you rather him be at Michigan? Or would you rather him learning all the route concepts and all of the jargon and getting mentally ready for 2025 in the NFL, in the organization, being integrated into the organization? You'd much rather him be here rehabbing a knee injury that's not going to cause him any problems long term than playing out his final year in Michigan. So just hold, and then in October, November, buy J.J. McCarthy in Dynasty.
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys that I would go fishing with, like I would try to get like a JJ and some change for a Tua, depending on where you are in your rebuild / if you're really chasing it. There have been some interesting offers that I've seen thrown around in group chats, but he's definitely at the moment. I think everybody right now is screaming like buy JJ McCarthy, but 2 months from now, everyone will, again, like Matt said, everyone will have forgotten. And, once they forget, it's pretty easy. Like I don't think that anybody in October is rushing to buy JJ McCarthy. And I think that's usually when you get your best deals.
And the Vikings defense is still going to be bad. It's not like they're going to revamp the entire defense in a year. They're not. Right. And it's like, we have Jared Dean in the chat saying he's worried about Aaron Jones' availability. Right? Since when is Aaron Jones missing lots of time with injury? He hasn't. The guy's a warrior. Last time I checked, Aaron Jones will be questionable, and then he will most likely play. That's what I remember from Aaron Jones. And I also remember, what do you think drafting a running back at the 101 absolves him of injury? No. Right? Jonathan Taylor missed a bunch of games last year. He's been the 101. Christian McCaffrey's missing games most years. He's been the 101 almost every year. Do you think that makes you immune to injury, that you're the 101? No. If you're undersized like McCaffrey or Aaron Jones, yes, your probability of being injured goes up slightly. You can see that in the Injury Finder app. We have the Injury Finder app in the App Store. You can check it out. You can see Aaron Jones' true probability of missing multiple games this season. It's there. The probability is set. It's not that much higher than someone else. And certainly for a 7th round player,
yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about a team where, if you look at the offense, the offensive coordinator is functionally Kevin O'Connell. We've seen him scheme up brilliant offensive performances for his running backs before, whether it's Dalvin or the running back that we won't name here. That was the dead zone pick of everybody last year, 2 years ago. But I think when you look at what Kevin O'Connell is going to allow,
you're talking about Alexander Madison.
Yeah, that guy.
All right,
yeah.
just making sure.
We're talking about Kevin O'Connell and what he allows his offense to do, especially with the defense that Flores loves to gamble. We saw it all last year. I don't think anybody blitzed more than the Vikings did. They're just, either we're going to get home or we're going to get burned, one or the other. But it's going to happen real quick. I think when you look at how they play complementary football, they really don't have much of a complement to their defense, right? Their defense is just pretty bad for the most part. The offense is going to have to find ways to grind out games, especially if they have a lead late. Aaron Jones is going to be running clock, man. But it's just the avenues to get there are so low that I think that they're going to have to use his abilities at pass catcher more often than not in catch-up time. And that's when you really get those fantasy points. It's not, hammering away when you have the lead late in games that you really get those chunks of points. It's, when you're down and they go check down over and over and over again on a drive, just trying to get, that last score to make it a 1-score game.
PJ Kennedy is asking JJ McCarthy or Michael Penix. What? No. Okay. This perhaps was obvious, but let me just state it to be clear. JJ McCarthy lost a hell of a lot of value. Okay. JJ McCarthy is not the same value he was because we don't have a year of JJ McCarthy to now base lots of enthusiasm around, right? The lost season for JJ McCarthy hurts his dynasty value because you lose that river card coming where, you hit on a flush, you hit on a straight on the river, and suddenly a guy that was, being drafted in the mid to late pick in the first round of superflex rookie drafts becomes a home run. Now all of a sudden you can get multiple firsts for him in superflex and 2QB leagues if he was a big hit this year, and he could have been a big hit. That's the real sad part. In the context of this team in this division with these weapons, he could have been a big hit. So, of course, his dynasty value takes a major hit. It declines dramatically. And, of course, it's going to decline below Michael Penix. I mean, this guy is what you want in fantasy football. He's everything you want. It's just in next year you want it.
Yeah.
Right? And so if we're already looking at next year, of course, the super mobile quarterback in Atlanta is the guy you want.
I think
that's not necessarily just because you'd rather. No one's going to do that deal. Also,
no.
It's not like you're going to be. Oh, here you go. Here's JJ McCarthy. You just have to give me. I'll take Michael Penix. Thank you. Reject. No one's going to do that, right? No. This is a different conversation. That's like saying, "Hey, we like Aaron Jones, right? What about a trade of Aaron Jones for Rachaad White?" Okay, no one's doing that, dude. Right? No, of course you're not doing that. Could Aaron Jones outscore Rachaad White this year? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right, but these are apples and oranges. At this point now, Penix and McCarthy are apples and oranges.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that McCarthy's not going to be a screaming value in late October because, again, what happens is there's fatigue. You have IR fatigue and you have roster fatigue. So you have these dynasty managers that are sick of looking at JJ McCarthy and they just want to get rid of him. And they also have, don't forget, this is the other thing. When you have multiple injured players, you want to optimize. There is this zeal to optimize your roster. And you're going to find managers that just want to get McCarthy off their team because they have other guys to put on IR. Because they have other guys they want to go pick up off the waiver wire. So because of some fringe running back that becomes available, suddenly in a dynasty league, JJ McCarthy becomes available.
Which is nuts. I don't know that I'd be moving JJ McCarthy because of some late round flyer running back that's on the waiver wire.
But that's what happens.
But it does happen.
Let me know in the chat, Tyler.
Tyler,
do you agree with this? Let us know in the chat. Haven't you seen this before?
Yeah.
The ability to fleece a league mate with someone on their IR because they just happen to have 3 guys injured with the star next to their name, and they're just trying to figure out how to pick up the next guy because they're sicko diehards, and they're actually overactive. There's a sweet spot in Dynasty of the level of activity of a Dynasty manager, and you see overactive managers, they overmanage their roster. That is the classic case of someone overmanaging their roster. And let me know if you agree or disagree in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, every year we see Dynasty managers do really strange things because they're bored. I could absolutely see, McCarthy manager being one of those. Again, if you have McCarthy and, you're trying to contend this year, which, probably very slim amount of rosters. Yeah, true. Oh my God.
Here's what happened. We've even seen examples in the chat. Jonas Whale talking about in the chat. Examples where Anthony Richardson was traded because someone. Yes, this happens. You're in a dynasty league. You're 5 years in. You've never won a championship. You feel like you're a piece away, and Anthony Richardson is burning a hole in your IR spot. So you deal him for running back X that you think can help you get over the finish line. But with others, like probably you get a pick, maybe you get another quarterback, maybe you get some Kirk Cousins and a running back and a pick, and then you give up Anthony Richardson, and you're like, well, this just got me. I had quarterback injuries. I needed a running back. This guy just solved all my problems, and I got a draft pick out of it. I'm feeling pretty good. My roster is now perfectly primed for the playoffs. I'm going to win this thing. Finally, it's been 5 years. I'm going to take this thing down. And then they wake up one morning in 2024, and they look at their team, and they go, didn't I have... Oh, yeah. No more Anthony Richardson. Wah,
He's
wah, wah, wah.
the toughest part about dealing. You watch. The toughest part about dealing AR is when you watch what Shane did in Indy last year. That couple of days ago, I was up at like 4:30 watching Colts cut-ups because that's what sickos do at 4 o'clock in the morning. And it was so interesting. It was a lot like Matt Nagy's offense with Mitchell Trubisky, where he was just smoke and mirroring his way down the field. It's no knock on Gardner Minshew at all, who I thought did a really nice job filling in. But you can see what the vision of that offense was with Anthony Richardson, and they're just going to be hell for people, man. I could not be higher on Anthony Richardson as a pure QB like player this year, but obviously I think that comes with a hell of a lot of fantasy points too, and I think he's going to run maybe even more than we think he'll run.
Oh yeah, Anthony Richardson's just going to be a monster. And now is the time, by the way. Now is the time to trade Adonai Mitchell. You have the Josh Downs injury propelling Adonai Mitchell into the slot in camp, right? So Adonai Mitchell, kind of the opposite of J.J. McCarthy in that he's getting the camp reps. You love to see it. You love to see him getting the camp reps with the starting lineup with the ones, and that's the buzz. And it's like, oh, wow, we loved Adonai Mitchell at Texas. So many loved him throughout the process. And then now he's getting an opportunity to run with the ones. And if you happen to draft him, now is when you got to pull the ripcord, because that is the Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor offense with some Michael Pittman sprinkled in for first downs. Mm-hmm. That's what that offense is. And then maybe there's a touchdown to Jelani Woods, and then the rest of the scraps between Alec Pierce and Downs and Adonai Mitchell are going to be few and far between. So you need to know when you are potentially bailed out with positive news, and sometimes it has to do with the injury to a teammate, take advantage, pull the ripcord, get out of there.
Yeah. I think if you have Mitchell and you don't intend to start him, which I don't know, if you do, you're in a tough spot.
In the Kings Classic, he went higher than I was ready to. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe there are people Mitchell that are very. I was like, wow, that's crazy. It's interesting, right? It's interesting where some are projecting him, but that's the thing. Most of the people that are super into Mitchell, they're not those that really live and die with fantasy projections, because anytime you actually sit down and have to do a realistic projection of the Indianapolis Colts offense, it's like, I can't find the targets to make this guy worth drafting. It's just it's a very difficult problem, because this is, a mobile quarterback. And in what world is Adonai Mitchell going to outscore Rashad Bateman? Right, Rashad Bateman, we know coming in, is the locked-in number 2 wide receiver on that team. Mm-hmm. Love him. Most people hate him, right? I'm a truther. But it doesn't take truthering to have Rashad Bateman ahead of Adonai Mitchell this year. It's just these are offenses that are bottom 10 in pass attempts, but there's touchdown equity there. There is. We know it, right? These are offenses that run through the running back. They run through Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry and their respective mobile quarterbacks. Very similar offenses, right? Mm-hmm. Just like Detroit and Atlanta are similar offenses for other reasons. Those offenses are run by up-tempo pocket passers and similar ancillary weapons. The big difference being Drake London 8-0, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Right?
Nope.
That's the big difference. And in fairness, on the other end, okay, Jahmyr Gibbs ain't no Bijan Robinson either.
No.
Yep.
No, he's not.
Bijan Mustard Robinson.
I'm excited to see what they do with him this year. Thank God.
That's the one guy. We're talking about builds. That's the one build where I'm like, okay, best ball, seasonal league, all different formats. The one first round hero RB that I am going in eyes wide open, it's Bijan Robinson. And that was my big regret from the Kings Classic draft at the FF Expo. Theo and I were we're drafting in the Kings Classic Snake Draft and the Kings Classic Auction. And we had the 101 because it was Kentucky Derby style. You can pick your own. And we got the 7th pick, and we picked the 101. No one wanted the 101. So we took it, and we took CeeDee Lamb. And then in the auction, someone nominated Bijan, and I was like, he's probably undervalued here. We should really go Bijan. But then we're like, oh, the build's we're gonna fuck our build if we go Bijan here. But we were hemming and hawing, and then going once, going twice, sold. And when we were looking at each other, going, in hindsight, we ended up building around CeeDee Lamb in that draft as well. I would have rather, for variance and for the fun of it, I would have rather had a true Bijan hero RB build in the auction, because then you can just go all in on wide receivers. Like you could have a build where you have both Bijan and a first-round wide receiver, and that's not possible. That's the beauty of an auction. Take advantage of it. You're going to do an auction, make sure you get 2 first-round picks. Make sure you are taking advantage of the structure that you could do with an auction that's just not possible with a traditional league. And so now I'm like, you know what? We really we would have been better off. We ended up with Lamb and Gibbs and Neighbors, but we would have been better off if it were Bijan and a wide receiver that was like a Garrett Wilson, right?
Yeah,
a Gibbs level receiver, right? I think that would have been a more fun build. I would have loved that team more. I also don't have enough Bijan, so it's like
me either.
That would have been good. I think Breece Hall went for dollars more than Bijan too, and that's what really killed me. I think when Breece Hall closed. When that bidding closed and I winced because I was like, oh man, we should have
pulled trig.
We should have bid up Bijan more. That was a mistake. Oh yeah. So we're gonna see some real fireworks there in Atlanta. That'll be interesting. What do you think is gonna happen to Kirk Cousins ultimately?
The strangest part about this, the situation in Atlanta, is they never saw either of them before, right? They're seeing both of them in this offense for the first time right now. Kirk Cousins has never thrown passes to Atlanta Falcons before. Well, maybe when he was throwing to defenders once upon a time. But, Michael Penix Jr. has never thrown passes to Atlanta Falcons either. So you're sitting there and you have these 2 quantities that you think you know about because you drafted one and paid a fuck ton of money to the other. You think you understand what these known quantities, so to speak, are. But no one knows how the chemistry is going to develop between him and a Drake London or him and a Kyle Pitts, or, even how they're going to deploy a Bijan Robinson to take some of the load off of Cousins, because he's not a particularly mobile quarterback. And Atlanta in and of itself is such an interesting case study this year in particular, because the fans at some point are going to say, if Kirk Cousins is not winning 10 games this year, they're going to demand that Michael Penix plays games. And it's on that front office and that coaching staff to decide, do we think he's ready? Because it was clear the Viking, to go back to the Vikings for a second, it was clear that their plan was at some point for J.J. McCarthy to take over for Sam Darnold, whether that was week 1 or sometime into the season. That was the plan. Now, the plan went awry, no fault of their own. This is a uniquely different case. I don't think they have any intention to start Michael Penix in the year 2024. But then you're making the decision on what you do with Kirk Cousins in 2025 somewhat blind, because like we said earlier, if you haven't seen him play against live bullets, all you have is practice and what you've seen in your own building. It's super tough to kind of gauge where you are. It took Jordan Love half a year to really get his feet wet, and then you saw what he can be. But
everyone values him based on the second half. No one's valuing Jordan Love based on the first half.
Yeah,
and Kirk Cousins made a hell of a decision. I mean, that's the place to go if you want to look good. I mean, that was a great choice. I mean, he manages his career as well as any player in the NFL. Who is his agent?
I can't remember who his agent is off the top of my head, but
his agent is one of the better. Just based on, hey, I manage Kirk Cousins. I'm like, okay, you're good. You know what you're doing.
I mean,
He's
you
betting
talk
on
about
himself constantly. He's maximizing his worth at every step of the way. He found a way to somehow get out of Washington. I mean, think about this.
So he played on. I'm pretty sure he played on 2 franchise tags in Washington.
Yeah.
So they legitimately could not keep him any longer. Then he went to Minnesota and bent them over a barrel for them to give him huge money. Then he signed an extension in Minnesota where they gave him more money.
Leverage. He said, "I've done it before. You want to try to call my bluff? Go ahead." Washington tried to call my bluff, and
huge money there again, and then coming off of an Achilles tear, he gets the money that he gets from Atlanta.
Yeah.
I mean, first team all ski mask, Hall of Famer at the bank, man.
Yeah.
I can't believe the amount
Tyler
of money.
is clipping that for social media. First team all ski mask for Kirk Cousins. I love that.
Yeah, he's a Hall of Famer at the bank, man. They love that guy.
I like that. I like that, Kirk. I really, Kirk Cousins. I like that. I like that a lot. He could be an agent after if he wanted to. Not that he would want to deal with those hassles and those troubles, but he could maybe. I think he could go start a hedge fund.
Kirk Cousins is one of those dudes that just wholeheartedly, you can just look at him. He's a likable guy. He works hard. His teammates have nothing but great things to say about him. He forever, right? He's one of the most durable players outside of last year that we've seen at the position. He rarely ever missed games other than, Achilles injury. And, I hope that he gets back to 100% and we see the Kirk Cousins that we saw in Minnesota, because a few of those years, if they had the right pieces around him, he was putting up, high-end QB1 numbers in certain weeks. You're looking at, borderline, I think if you put the right pieces around him when he was younger, you had a borderline, spike your MVP candidate at times.
Yeah.
And it was really sad to see him last year go through what he went through, because we wanted to see him play out that year and see what the Vikings could have been. That would have probably given us a much better barometer of what they would be this year. But now you're taking him and transplanting him to Atlanta. And I think so much of this is, do you have the right coaches in place? Do you have an understanding of what he does and doesn't do well? And how does that mesh with what a Kyle Pitts does well, what a Drake London does well, what, a Bijan Robinson does well? How do those things come together? Because I don't know that he is inherently significantly better than, Michael Penix's ceiling will be. But I think at this particular moment, you've got to consider the Falcons the favorites in the NFC South based on the moves that they've made. Yesterday getting Judon. They're not playing around. Justin Simmons, they're not playing around in Atlanta. I mean, they're getting really, really, really good players to buy in there. And so I think if you look at it that way, anything short of an NFC South crown this year is probably a disappointment for Kirk Cousins year one. But I mean, this is a team that you probably don't want to play in December as they're kind of really getting together and figuring out what their pieces do best as a unit. I wouldn't want to play Atlanta in December, man. And you're probably going to have to go there for a road playoff game at some point. So I could absolutely see Atlanta as one of those teams in the divisional round that's giving, a Detroit or a Philly or a San Francisco or Dallas hell.
So are they still 9.5, or is that moved up? Because they're over under total wins this year. In our draft kit, we actually have it posted in the world famous draft kit. But it's been 9.5. Is it moved to 10?
I haven't seen it move to 10 yet, at least not on my end. But I think that's the right number. I mean, the lines makers for this are very good at what they do, because so much of are wanting to bet the over. Nobody wants to bet unders, but you wanting to bet the over also in your head implies health. Not everybody's going to be healthy. There's just no way. We're playing 17 games. It's a long season. The Vikings lost their quarterback before the season even started. I mean, we've got guys on IR before the season even kicks off. So that's one of those things where I would just stay away from that number as a whole. If you want to bet like Atlanta NFC South champion, I think that's probably a better way to go than a win total, because it probably won't take 11 wins to win this division.
But they cross against the AFC West, and that's the Broncos. That's the Chargers with now plantar fasciitis for Justin Herbert. right? So Justin Herbert, he's got the doomed offensive coordinator and the doomed foot injury. That's not good. Then they play the Saints twice. Then they're crossing against what I mean, is it the NFC East? So they're going to play the Commanders and the Giants, right? They've also got random games against like the Seahawks because of where they finished last year, because of their record. The Steelers, right?
I think it's more like
there's a look at the schedule, man. Look at the schedule. This is a good schedule. I would say it's a great schedule. They even have they play the Vikings. Like their schedule is picture perfect. They close it out. Listen to who they close it out against after their bye week 12. Not even the entire second half. They play the Cowboys. This is the second half. You ready for the second half of the Falcons?
Let's hit it.
Saints, Broncos, Chargers, Vikings, Raiders, Giants, Commanders, Panthers.
Oh my God.
How do they not win 10 games? I mean, how do they not win 10 games? You tell me.
Wow.
How did I win 10 games?
Yeah.
I almost like if you could get the extra juice to even go 11, to just say, hey, listen, I'm actually going to go 11. Things are going to break their way, and they break their way. It's like it's a straight shot to 11 games.
They're going to win a lot of games this year. I think that they win the South. That's been my take since they basically brought in Kirk Cousins.
Of course they're going to win the South.
But the really strange part about that division is, what does Baker look like without Dave Canales, who's now in Carolina, right? Now, Carolina is its own mess of epic proportions that we've discussed ad nauseum on here, so we don't even need to go into that. But you're looking there, and the team that everyone's confused about is, what the hell are the Saints doing, man? What is going on? Does anybody, you have all of these fun pieces, whether it's Shaheed, Olave, Alvin Kamara, all these really fun pieces, and then they're tied to Derek Carr, which just brings me endless despair.
Isn't this just even if it's unintentional, it's just an unintentional intentional tank, right? We have the pieces to appease the fan base and to stay quote unquote competitive, but not really. Like Derek Carr, these types of pieces give you just enough hope that the team could, maybe make the playoffs to appease everybody. And then, but under the radar, I don't know if this is happening. It should be happening if they know what they're doing, that the entire front office staff is like, oh yeah, we're going to lose a lot of games, baby. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And then the tricky thing is to have that conversation with, the top equity holders and be like, listen, between us, okay, we're going to be great in 3 years. Let it play out. We got Derek Carr throwing picks. We've hollowed out the defense and the offensive line. We've stripped it down. We couldn't afford any of these guys because we were so over-leveraged in previous years. We're going to save you money. We're going to rebuild for the future. Get ready to head to the Super Bowl in 2027, but just let this play out. We got the perfect tank head coach. Dennis Allen knows in his bones he's not going to be there very long. So he's just there to save face and try to do a good job and be a professional. That's all we need, right? And it's same thing with Derek Carr down the board.
Yeah.
Right? It's perfect. It's just it actually is. It's the perfect under the radar tank that you're doing, not out in the open where you're drawing the ire of other owners and fans. And we've seen this happen. It's a very difficult thing to do, to just outwardly, openly tank. We saw Sashi Brown lose his job over this. Like, Legend. It is a very dangerous game. If you and I were controlling a franchise, we would have to really play a political smoke and mirrors game to tank the right way and keep our jobs.
Yeah.
And it would have to be like this tight circle of people, the circle of trust, where it's like, okay, inside the circle of trust, we get these 5 people. We know what we're really doing. But the outward messaging is, oh, we're trying to be competitive. We're trying to win now. We think this guy's the answer. We know he's not the answer. We know he's not the answer. But it's just good enough that no one asks questions about what we're really doing, which is trying to finish inside the top 10 to get, and then trade for draft picks, whenever we can, acquire as many draft picks as we can, make sure we have a top 10 pick every year for the next couple of years. And then everybody looks up and they're like, oh, this team's kind of dangerous. They've shed all these bad contracts. All these 28-year-olds have left for one-year deals elsewhere. They've picked up all these supplemental picks. Would you look at the Saints? How'd they do that? And then we're sitting there going, well, we were trying to be competitive.
We lucked into this. It's the Lions model. We've talked about that team probably more than any other on here. And the reason is doing what they did in the manner that they did it requires so much buy-in from everybody. It requires buy-in from your quarterback.
I think it's too much buy-in. I think to just go and trade Stafford, right, was just going too far. I think it's a very dangerous game that Brad Holmes played, and they were able to rebuild fast enough. That's the thing that most of the time, I believe, let's say 75% of the time, that Detroit rebuild, if you reshuffle the deck and you redeal it every time, we put it in a simulation, Brad Holmes gets fired more than half the time. It does not come together that quickly, and he's gone. That's why it's so difficult to rebuild the right way. You have to pretend, and you have to avoid some of these more obvious moves that would show your hand to the whole league. Oh, we're tanking. No, we're not. No, we're not. No, we are going for it.
No, and the funniest part about that is sometimes even when you're trying to quote unquote rebuild, right? Kwesi in Minnesota does a great job of this. They lucked their way into a 13-4 season. We all saw it. Everybody out there, nobody outside of Viking land was like, this is a legitimate 13-4 team. They're a championship contender. No. That was a 9-win team that got very lucky in one possession games, and good for them. They earned it. Awesome. Earn it on the field. But if we roll the dice on that season again 100 times, that's like a 1 percentile outcome. There's no shot that was a true 13-win team that we look at kind of the way that we look at a San Francisco or a Kansas City or a Philly. And so even accidentally winning games like that gives you a lot longer a leash as a GM, which I just find funny. I don't think he was trying to win 13 games that year. I think they just happened to win 13 games that year. Every year there's a team that comes out of nowhere. So I'm excited to find out this year who that team will be.
They are going to be lucking into the perfect record this year.
Yeah.
Right. Where the Vikings with JJ McCarthy, he's such a goddamn winner. It's like, would you knock it off with the winning buddy? Like it's possible that we're looking back 3 years from now going, that's the best thing that ever happened to them. All those Sam Darnold picks, however many, 3 pick sixes on the season, that allowed them to get the top 5 pick in the draft, which then allowed them to get yet another weapon for J.J. McCarthy, or a keystone to the offensive line, or just the best defender on the board, whatever it is, whatever piece they were able to get with what draft pick they're going to get. They're going to look back on that couldn't have played out any better for them building this franchise the way they did, because they had the Sam Darnold, which was like, hey man, we paid him $8 million, we tried. Right, we knew that we had to get a quality backup. We're here to win.
That's where I think a lot of teams, right? I don't know. I don't understand. One thing that I'll never understand is you spend, let's say, $60 million on your starting QB or super high draft capital, and your backup is someone that you wouldn't want out there in worst case scenario. I don't understand why you would ever leverage your assets that way.
Yeah.
It's never made any sense to me. Like, Vegas just brought in Nate Peterman. That's the grossest QB room I've ever seen in my life. It's I think it's Minshew, O'Connell, and Nathan Peterman.
Hey, you say that. you say that, and then O'Connell exceeds expectations, and you're going to be like, well, O'Connell, we could be
Hey, that
having a
was my
show in a
guy.
couple months.
That was my guy.
We could have a show in a couple months where you're thinking, well, maybe they stick with O'Connell. I'm not so sure they're going to go quarterback in the draft. I'm like, oh, come on. They're going quarterback next year. Everything's set up for them to go quarterback in the draft next year. And you're like, well, O'Connell.
Carson Beck, get ready to learn Las Vegas, buddy.
Right. I think it could be what's the best comp? Houston, right? Didn't they think that wasn't there a possibility they had hit on a mid-round quarterback?
Yeah, it was like Davis Mills.
It was Davis Mills, right? Davis Mills. It's easy to forget. If you forgot, it's okay. It's very easy to forget that Davis Mills had some buzz. You could get a second rounder in Dynasty, Superflex, 2 QB leagues for Davis Mills not that long ago. Not that long ago. That was there. And then, of course, right? But so teams like, no, we're going. You think we've hit on a fringe quarterback here? Fantasy gamers, you 2 QB people, you're celebrating? No. We're going quarterback with the 102. We're going quarterback. You guys are delusional. We're going quarterback here. What do you think? Come on.
And again, sometimes you just have to get lucky. You know, they probably had the 101, they probably take Bryce. And the Panthers saved them from themselves because CJ was the only other pick there.
Oh, so and we actually on Fast Draft there is a rookie only draft, and there's already some teams that are dead because they drafted JJ McCarthy. Because you really want in Fast Draft, it's nice to have the best teams last year in the Origins rookie game, rookie only tournament, $25,000, $5,000 to first, had CJ Stroud. So the Stroud Dell stacks with Puka would have won it didn't exist last year, but that's what would have won.
Yeah.
And so if you're playing a tournament, a rookie tournament, you want to make sure you have X% of Michael Penix. You want to make sure you even have X% of Bo Nix.
Yeah.
And so it's understandable that you would have wanted to have some JJ McCarthy, but that's the thing. When you're max entering, and it's really easy to max enter on Fast Draft because there's a turbo mode and you can just order 10 lineups with these rankings and 10 lineups with these rankings and 10 lineups with these rankings, and it auto drafts for you based on your rankings. And then so, yes, I'm going to have some rankings I'm going to have some McCarthy teams that are dead, but it's okay because I appreciate the value of quarterback in a rookie game, and I also am going to have plenty of Penix. I'm also going to have plenty of Bo Nix, and that's the thing. You look at a portfolio of best ball rosters, every year injuries will render 20%, the bottom 20% dead in best ball. And so that's the same in any format. It's the same. And the strategy with Origins is, how do I get production out of my 5th and 6th rounders? And, one of the strategies I've seen on Twitter, the cool thing is a new game released and there's already people with strategy talk on Reddit and on Twitter. It's really cool. And they're like, here's what you do. You draft either a running back who could be the guy, a guy behind the guy running back. Then you're looking at potential spike weeks. Or you can go with like a tight end. Because I was at the expo talking to Andrew Coop. And he's like, hey, man, like I wish tight ends were more valuable in this format because there's no dedicated tight end position. And I'm like, well, I'd rather have a tight end Kyle Pitts at cost in the Flex 4 game than Drake London. So, yeah, I think on par, just looking at the fantasy points scored, it's very possible that Pitts just flat out outscores London. And it doesn't matter if there's a tight end position or not. You want Drake London. But because there is no dedicated tight end position, you can get Kyle Pitts at a value in the Flex 4. And then these guys like a Theo Johnson, an Eric All, these fringy tight ends, you can get at value in the 5th and 6th round of the rookie draft, the Origins. So that's really what it's all about, is finding those sleepers in the rookie draft. And then in the Flex 4 draft, it's all about ownership, right? It's all about, we post the tournament ownership, or it's posted in the app. So you can see, oh, Blake Corum is only rostered in like 4% of leagues. What's Ladd McConkey's ownership? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you know what? Here's what we'll do. Everyone here, okay? If you go play in an Origins draft or go play in particular a Flex 4 draft on Fast Draft, email me podfather@rotounderworld.com. Email me Ladd McConkey's tournament ownership in Flex 4, and then I'll give you another bonus. I'll give you a bonus $25, and then I'll give you an extra bonus, an extra 10 on top of that, if you also give me Ladd McConkey's rostership percentage in Origins. Now, I know what his roster percentage is in Origins already, but so if you give me those two numbers, you're going to get a big extra credit in the app from me, podfather@rotounderworld.com. You're welcome. So that's a fun little contest.
Yeah,
that's a fun little
I've had
contest.
a lot of fun.
That's not, yeah, you've played.
Yeah,
right?
I've had a lot of fun on there.
You're ripping drafts. They're filling fast. We crushed it yesterday. There were 4x the number of drafts that happened yesterday than there have ever been. So it's going to be tough to keep that growth up, but that's what's happening. So it's exciting. Anand's on it, and a lot of people are playing, and it's pretty cool. And it's player-centric strategy as opposed to build-centric. So that's the difference. There have been a lot of great best ball apps that I love, and if you love roster construction strategy, those can't be beat, right? Mm-hmm. But if you love player takes and you have your guys and you would rather roster construction not be as much of a deciding factor, then that's really where Fast Draft's differentiation comes into play.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things is, the rookie tournament, especially. When you try to go in there and you look at 5th and 6th round picks, you're just taking whoever the hell you want.
But you know these guys because you watched them in college, and you were, you were there when they were drafted in round 6.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these guys, you brought up an Eric All, super interesting one, Theo Johnson, but the real fun with Fast Draft is you're done in 10 minutes. Like there's legitimately your draft will take less than 10 minutes.
I saw a draft go off in 5 minutes yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally like waiting in the car lot for your kid at school. In between when you take your lunch break somewhere. It's not as much of a commitment as any other draft app that I've ever seen, whether it's your regular fantasy football app or you're doing best ball or even something like an SFB. You're on the clock for a grand total of maybe a minute and a half. That's the amount of time that it takes for you to draft a team. And so I'm going to hop on a bunch Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week. I'll tweet out about it. Hopefully a bunch of you guys will be in there with us, but I'm having a lot of fun, man. It is a totally unique draft experience. It's unlike anything else that's out there. And trust me, I've tried a lot of them.
I know.
But I think the fun of it is, we love drafting. That's what we talk about. We talk about rostership. We talk about, what you do as a dynasty manager, and that's a very different game. This is just pure fun. It's excitement. How much Drake London do you have? Well, when you only have 6 players, that ownership percentage changes drastically as opposed to, a full underdog best ball draft where you have, 18, 19 players. It's very different. And I think that the thing that makes it fun is now, after the conversation we had today, I'm going to draft a bunch of teams over the weekend and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday with Bijan as, that first pick in Flex 4 and just kind of see what those builds look like just because I don't have a ton of Bijan exposure elsewhere. I think it's a fun way to, get exposure to your favorite player because it might not be possible all the time in Dynasty or in redraft or an underdog.
And all you need to do, let's say you look at your portfolio because it's front and center your portfolio. And actually in the draft room, it shows you your exposure while you're drafting. And you're like, oh, I don't have enough Bijan. What you can do is you could submit a turbo mode order with your rankings with Bijan jacked all the way to 101. And just do five teams, an order of I want 5 teams with these rankings with Bijan at the 101, and then those drafts will rip off, even if you're not even paying attention. If you're not even there to draft, it's fine. It happens. It emails you the teams. And then you go back and check your portfolio and like, okay, now I like my Bijan. I fixed the glitch. Like there was a glitch in my portfolio. I didn't have enough Bijan. And I just quickly submitted a 5 draft order through Turbo. And now I have enough Bijan, and now I can move on with my life.
Yeah.
Right? That's the point of it. So
yeah.
For Anand Nanduri, I'm the Podfather. For all of us here at Player Profiler, thank you for joining the Decision Point, and we will see you next time. Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.